moving certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Looking good on the Valley freeways and our main secondaries with no problems there. We have the eastbound lanes blocked of Timpanogos Highway, the commuter lane at 500 West, and it's still going to be blocked for at least another probably 2 to 3 hours. You will need to avoid that spot and use an alternate. Did you miss the last sale? I know it's on your list, so don't miss this one. Zero Res carpet cleaning. Right now it's just $25 per room. Minimums apply. Pricing ends Tuesday, August 22nd. Online at zerores.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, there's a chance for thunderstorms again this afternoon for the Wasatch Front. A higher likelihood tomorrow. The storms are possible through the rest of the week. Temperatures will stay in the 80s. And right now we're at 86 degrees, mostly cloudy skies at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The headline, when it comes to the Republican candidates for president, the elephant in the room is always the former president and his legal challenges. 8 candidates will debate for the first time on Wednesday. And the real question is, what do you do when the elephant in the room isn't in the room? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, for these candidates that are running on the Republican side of the aisle to be the nominee for president, the elephant in the room is always the former president in one form or another. But on Wednesday of this week in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they will have the first debate on the Republican side. And the question will literally be, what do you do when the elephant in the room is actually not in the room? Former President Trump has indicated that he is going to skip the debate in Milwaukee. He's actually said he's going to skip all the debates. He doesn't see a need to be part of those conversations. So we want to get into, what does that actually do? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Who does that help? Who does that hurt? How are the candidates looking at the former president not being on the debate stage, despite being ahead in the polls? We know polls are only one tiny indicator when it comes to actually gaining the nomination for president on either side of the aisle. There's a whole lot of things that go on in between that, including delegates, which is where the action really is. But we want to dig into this as we get ready for the debate in Milwaukee on Wednesday. And so I want to go through some of the candidates in terms of how they're thinking about it, how they're approaching this debate. One candidate in particular, Vivek Ramaswamy, was interviewed in Iowa and asked his reaction about what happens if the former president skips all the primary debates. And here's what he had to say both about the former president and what Joe Biden is doing in terms of debates.
Well, look, Joe Biden, I think it is pathetic that he will not debate and his party will protect him from debating. Now, I fully expect to see Donald Trump on that debate stage. It is my expectation Trump will be there because, as I've known him, he's not a man that I know of to be afraid. He's not somebody who has made a habit of himself to be a coward.
All right, so that's one take on that. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson has qualified for the debate stage. He appeared on MSNBC with Chris Hayes and talked about his focus during the debates.
ASA2024.com is where you go to make sure I get on the debate stage, and I'm not going to defend Donald Trump. I will be a prosecutor. I will be telling the truth on Donald Trump, and whether he's there or not, he will be a focal point of issue, both what happened on January 6th, but also how he will not lead the Republican Party well into the future.
So that's former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, and he's an interesting one. I think he'll actually do quite well on the debate stage, so it'll be fascinating to see how he positions himself. He's definitely a policy guy. He's been a governor, so he knows how to do the executive branch thing. So I think he'll actually show pretty well and might surprise a few people in terms of how he goes about it. Now, one that I'm really going to be fascinated to watch on Wednesday is Chris Christie, who, of course, has spent about 90% of the time that he's talking about the former president. And I think he was looking forward more than anyone to being toe-to-toe, face-to-face, in the cage match with the former president. And now he has nothing to swing at on the stage. So will he continue to go down that path? Will it allow him to pivot into some other things around his experience? Or does he kind of flatten out because he won't have his primary target and his principal reason for governing? Here's what he said on MSNBC.
If what he were saying were true, which is he's got this great record as president, and that he's so far ahead, why wouldn't you come onto the stage and take a victory lap and just lap everybody else on the stage? And, all I could say is this. If he believes he should be the nominee, if he believes that he's got such a great record, if he believes he's the best person to go against Joe Biden, then show up on Wednesday night and stop being such a coward.
So Chris Christie is going to continue to poke and prod the former president. They'll go back and forth on all the social media spaces, but they will not go toe-to-toe on the debate stage on Wednesday, as the former president said he won't be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for that. And so we'll see how that all continues to play out. Now, there was also something interesting over the weekend by Governor Larry Hogan, who was on CNN's State of the Union, and he talked about what was going on, what was happening with the former president, what was going on with the different candidates. And he kind of ratcheted things up in terms of that possibility of the No Labels group being fully ready to run a candidate if it is a Biden-Trump rematch. And here's how he responded.
Well, look, I think we're at a point that we've never been in this country where 2/3 of the people are not interested in voting for the Republican or Democratic nominee, the likely nominees. And, an overwhelming majority of people are completely fed up with politics. They think Washington is broken. And so even though this normally is not something that we consider and talk about seriously because it hasn't happened in the past, if Trump and Biden are the nominees, it's very likely that No Labels will get access to the ballot and will offer an alternative. And, if most of the voters don't want A or B, we have an obligation to give them C.
So, again, interesting ratcheting up of the possibilities there with No Labels fielding a candidate. If it is a Joe Biden, Donald Trump rematch, I think the likelihood of that goes very high. And we're going to break this down over the next couple of days in terms of debate strategy is always an interesting thing to see what's the approach, what are you trying to do. I know many of the candidates are maybe exhaling a little bit in terms of not having to contend for oxygen on the debate stage with the former president. I am certain they will be asked questions about the former president. It will also really be a poignant thing to look at in terms of who raises the former president anyway. Many of the candidates have been very critical of the media for constantly asking them questions about former President Trump. So this is going to be a tag team in terms of the how the debate rolls out on Fox News. And my guess is there will be a couple of questions about the former president, but I think they'll probably leave it at that. And then the question will be, will Chris Christie constantly bring up the former president? Will Ron DeSantis, hoping to maybe reignite his campaign and create the appearance that it is a two-person race between DeSantis and Trump? And if they do that, then how do the rest of the candidates respond to that? Do they then have to get in the fray? And does that unravel into a debate that is all about the former president and nothing about the future of the country or the principles or the policies that should lead it? I think that's a dangerous space for all of these candidates. And again, part of this is restraint. Part of this is having the ability to know when to jump in and when to pull back, what to lean into and what to just avoid. And it's going to be tricky. This is complicated debate stage. You'll have 9 candidates. I said 8 earlier. It is actually 9. Suarez has also qualified for the debate stage, so there will be 9 candidates on the debate stage. The former president will not be one of them, but with 9 people on the stage, you slice and dice those minutes up, and it goes very fast. And so these candidates are going to have to be incredibly focused. You don't have any time to wander. You don't have any time to chase sidebar issues. You have to have a message, a strategy, and you have to stick with it, have the discipline to stay with it all the way through. And so we'll continue to break that down as we go through today and tomorrow in preparation for Wednesday. But it is going to be most intriguing to see what happens when the elephant in the room is not in the room for the Republican debate in Milwaukee, and who still talks about the elephant, who takes it as an opportunity to talk about principles and policy and how they would lead the nation. I think that's going to be very telling, and I think it will have a big impact as we get ready to roll into the fall campaign. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. When the day's almost done,
Another day, another dollar.
there's the drive home. Put Jeff Kaplan in the passenger seat.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks. You're in my car.
Yep, let me catch you up.
Jeff has traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the nines, breaking stories, and his signature minute of news. It's like Jeff's there just for you.
This is a little awkward.
Isn't it great?
Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News, 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
They say good things come to those who wait, but we both know the truth. If you want the good things in life, you've got to go out and get them. So if you've been dreaming of a Cadillac, don't wait. Head to Jerry Seiner Cadillac and get one for yourself. With their award-winning XT4, 5, and 6 models available on-site and the area's top selection of certified pre-owned Cadillacs, there's no need to wait to drive in luxury. Stop dreaming, start driving. Visit Jerry Seiner and experience the Seiner difference.
When it's hot like this, air conditioners struggle to keep up. Parts are under more stress, and sometimes those parts fail. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and no one helps more homeowners maintain and repair their air conditioners than Any Hour Services. As a matter of fact, last year, over 32,000 homeowners called Any Hour Services for help maintaining and repairing their systems. Any Hour Services has over 100 HVAC technicians to help with everything from maintenance, repair, to installing a new system. This summer, there'll be a lot of people told they need to replace their air conditioner, and they'll wonder, do I really need to? If you're told you need to replace your air conditioner and you still have questions, Any Hour Services can give you a second opinion and let you know what options are available. Maybe it just needs a little maintenance or a small repair. Maybe it does need to be replaced, but if you don't feel good about being told you need to replace your air conditioner, don't ignore those feelings. Call Any Hour Services for help with air conditioner maintenance, repair, or to schedule a free second opinion. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Hey guys, if you're a patient at another Wave clinic for ED, Revive will transfer your care for free. And for those that medically qualify, we'll give you 4 Wave treatments for free, plus a 1-month supply of ED medication when you start Wave treatment with us. Our Renaissance Wave therapy is proven, non-invasive, and far more affordable than other Wave clinics. Book your consultation today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action. Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Dave and Debbie.
Where do people in Utah have an opportunity on a regular basis to voice their opinions? That's on our show on KSL News Radio. You have a way to share your experiences and to get your message out to the entire community. Where else in Utah can they go? Nowhere. That's on our show.
We have to be so careful not to take things out of context. It's very easy to manipulate what someone says to fit your own narrative. And we don't want to do that. We want to take your best argument, you take my best argument, and if we don't always say it perfectly, that's okay. It's a conversation. It's a give and take.
Listeners call the show and are willing to share how they're dealing with life circumstances. This is why our show is so important to this community and why our listeners are so important to KSL News Radio.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, fire teams are already planting grass to restore the landscape around the Thompson fire in southern Utah. Second, UDOT is reminding everybody it's illegal to put campaign signs in the state's right-of-way. And third, cleanup underway after Tropical Storm Hillary passed through Southern California. Right now, 86 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Over the weekend, Denmark and the Netherlands announced that they will send F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. That is an historic announcement, to be sure. But how will it help Ukraine in the fight against Russia in the short term and the medium term? I think there's no question long term that's going to be a very useful thing. But there's so many complexities to this. It's much more difficult than just saying, yep, here's a bunch of planes, go at it. There are a host of things that we have to get to, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's start with Ukrainian President Zelensky, who's in Denmark today, and he addressed the country's parliament and thanked them specifically for their support.
Thank you for your help, all the help provided to Ukraine. Thank you for harpoons. Russians afraid. Thank you. Caesars, leopards, breadless, drones. Yes, they're afraid drones.
So there are a number of things that President Zelensky was liking to poke Russia with in terms of what they're afraid of, including Leopard and Bradley tanks, drones, and, of course, F-16s are clearly on that list. And I want to dig in now in terms of what does that actually mean that these F-16s, we know that the U.S. agreed to help train pilots on F-16s. The U.S. is not providing those F-16s, but did agree that they would help train pilots to fly F-16s. And so that was an important announcement from the Biden administration a little while back. Now we've got Denmark and the Netherlands delivering on those promises. So on Friday, we talked to retired Colonel Jonathan Sweet, who said that so far we haven't really been providing the Ukrainians with weapons it needs to win the war. It's been much more about the defensive posture that Ukraine was in, defending. But now you actually have to go out and win. They have to have this counteroffensive, which has been much more difficult than I think anyone had really thought through. The ability of the Russian forces to dig those trenches, to place landmines everywhere, and just how slow that makes the process for Ukraine to be able to make anything move forward. So on Friday, we spoke with Colonel Sweet, and here's what he had to say.
The strategy right now is not a winning strategy. At least from our perspective, it's not a winning strategy. It's been a strategy from the beginning to weaken Russia. It's been a strategy to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression, and has been, to that perspective, it's been very successful. And I'm sure Ukraine has no issues with the amount of support that's been given to them to do that. But as you know, in June of last year, with the counteroffensive in the Kharkiv area and the introduction of HIMARS, momentum shifted, and it shifted into the Ukrainians' favor, and they were able to begin to start to push back on Russian aggression. And to date, the weapons that they need now to finish the deal, to close the deal, they're simply not receiving. And that involves precision deep strike capability, which could be from ATACMS, close air support, possibly from F-16s.
So I asked Colonel Sweet about these F-16s that were now coming from Denmark, the impact that would have. Would it make a difference? Here's something interesting he had to say.
Yeah, well, it won't change the dynamic in the next 8 to 12 months, though. And that's key. So the fight, it's going to affect today's fight. It will affect the fight if the fight continues to get pushed to the right. If it gets out to 2024 and 2025, that close air support will help.
Yeah.
Okay. It will provide, an additional tool to a combined arms effort. That one platform by itself doesn't change anything, but as part of a team, it affects the ability for Ukraine to create the conditions for the close fight to be successful by hitting targets a little bit deeper.
So this deep strike capability is really the critical thing that I took away from my conversation with Colonel Sweet, is that it's one thing, this close fight stuff, and that's where just the slog is, and it's very slow in terms of the counter-offensive. He says, but you've got to be able to go deep. Those deep strike is what will actually cause Russia to retreat in a bigger way. So when we talked about that, obviously him saying, look, this is not going to change the dynamic in the next 8 to 12 months, he pointed out something that I hadn't thought about in terms of the context of all of that. He talked about training crews, not just pilots, and all the other things that go with it.
Now, the other thing that's missing out is one thing to train the pilot, but it's also another thing to train the crews that maintain that weapon system. Okay, so while we're seeing all the discussion about we're going to train pilots, and then once they're trained, we're going to give them the aircraft, what I haven't seen, at least from the U.S. side, I think I saw in a plan that Denmark had that it would take 6 months to train the crews. But there needs to be that plan. And then, oh, by the way, there are some restrictions, if you will, about runway length and where you're going to put that asset and how you're going to defend that asset once you introduce it to the theater. Yeah. Things that maybe could have been thought about 6 to 12 months ago that we're having to be forced to think about now while they're fighting a counteroffensive.
So, again, those are the things you don't think about. The headline is great. Netherlands sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. That's a great message. That's a great headline. But then you have to get underneath that. We've talked about the training of the pilots. The U.S. has been involved in that and supportive of that. He said, but that's one thing. It's quite another thing to train the crew that has to maintain all the weapon systems. You think how complicated and complex all the electronics, all of the things that go into maintaining an F-16 fighter. Just go ask our friends up at Hill Air Force Base. They'll tell you what it actually takes to keep those things operation ready and ready to go up in the sky and do the job and do it right. That is a big deal. And so training the crews on how they're going to maintain those once they get them is a big deal. And then there were a host of other things he threw into that list that I hadn't thought about. That they've got to have runways that are a little bit longer so that they can get them in and get them out. He also mentioned the fact that there's got to be a strategy in terms of how do you protect those assets, not just in the air, but what happens when you got them on the ground, in between missions or refueling or getting maintenance. How do you make sure that they aren't just a soft, easy target for Russia to go take them back out? Those are multi-million-dollar weapon systems. And you got to have a strategy in terms of how are you going to defend those once you've got them in the theater. So it's one more example of why we can't just go by the headlines. You have to get underneath it. You have to think again. And it's one of the things I love about having Colonel Sweet on the show with us is he helps us make sure that we're not just saying, okay, this is awesome. F-16s are going to Ukraine. That's going to change the dynamics of the war. He said, well, maybe in 8 to 12 months. If everything goes right, if the pilots get trained well, if the crews that will maintain them get trained well, and if there is a strategy for protecting those assets once they are in theater. Those are all things that most people aren't talking about or thinking about when it comes to how do you actually help Ukraine not just survive this, not just eke its way along, but how do you actually get them to a point where they can start winning the war, where the counteroffensive can actually start leading towards Russian retreat in a more significant way and beyond Ukrainian borders and back into Russia. because that's the ultimate test. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news, but don't go anywhere. We have a real treat. Mitch Daniels, former governor of Indiana, president emeritus of Purdue University, a great innovator, great thinker, is going to join us live on the show to talk about Calvin Coolidge and why he matters when we talk about our debt and deficit spending. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour is breaking news. Major General Michael Turley has decided to retire after he was put on leave last week. Governor Spencer Cox has appointed Brigadier General Daniel Boyack as the new Adjutant General of the Utah National Guard to take his place. Turley was put on leave after an investigation of an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate soldier. He's denied any such relationship took place. With security still top of mind for many as kids go back to school, the Canyon School District has just finished upgrading the last of their schools to new HD security cameras. KSL News Radio's Adam Small has details.
District Risk Manager Ryan Jakeman says it took almost 8 years and a pretty penny to get the 1080p cameras set up in all 45 of their schools, but he says it's already made a difference.
It's well worth it. I mean, with the availability and the visual acuity.
Jakeman says these new cameras are not only HD, but administrators can zoom in, move some around, giving them the details they need in any given situation.
The district has also set up secure entryways at middle and elementary schools, and they've trained the staff to keep exterior doors locked and closed. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Wildfires in the state of Washington forced entire towns to evacuate over the weekend. At least 2 people were killed by fires that burned over 35,000 acres. White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton told reporters aboard Air Force One that President Biden spoke with Washington Governor Jay Inslee about those fires.
Let the governor know that he had authorized fire management assistant grants to support firefighting that is underway in the state.
The president was on his way to Hawaii to look at the aftermath of the fires on Maui. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average, down now just a few points below the 0 point, 3 points right now. And the NASDAQ is down, or is rather up. A strong update for NASDAQ, 207 points at this hour. And our KSL weather is next. We could see some more storms this afternoon. KSL News Time, 1:32.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Get your home's electrical system running in peak condition by scheduling a $39 whole home electric inspection with the professionals at Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric today. The electrical experts at Yes are ready to help identify unsafe conditions and possibly prevent expensive repairs in the future. Proudly serving Utah for more than 45 years. Visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
If you own a small to medium-sized business that kept employees on payroll through COVID, you may have a big cash refund waiting for you. The Employee Retention Credit is a tax credit of up to $26,000 per employee. And now, more businesses than ever qualify. The experts at RefundsPro.com specialize in cutting through the red tape of qualifying for this government program. Most of their refunds are over $100,000. Even businesses that have received PPP funds may be eligible. And there are absolutely no fees unless you receive a refund. So there's no reason not to apply. If your business experienced shutdowns, limited capacity, supply chain challenges, or reduced revenue due to COVID, you likely qualify. RefundsPro.com has already helped hundreds of businesses.
So don't lose the refund you're owed by missing the deadline. Get started today with a free 5-minute questionnaire at refundspro.com. That's refunds with an S, pro.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We do have a fire by the roadside affecting traffic in Weber County, northbound I-15. It's near 21st Street in Ogden. And right now it looks like traffic is being held back. I can't see where UHP is in the traffic camera, but it doesn't look like any northbound traffic is getting through at this point as fire crews continue to arrive on the scene to battle this blaze. When it comes to trusted, affordable auto care, nobody does it better than Burt Brothers Tire and Service. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a chance for thunderstorms again this afternoon for the Wasatch Front. A higher likelihood tomorrow. Storms are possible through the rest of the week, and temperatures will stay in the 80s. And right now, we're at 84 degrees and mostly cloudy. High today, mostly cloudy through the rest of the week. And right now, we're at 84 degrees and mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
When we think of our great American presidents, we often talk about the likes of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and so on. And while those presidents did extraordinary things for the country, there's some that actually apply and might be even a little more pertinent to our day today, where we get so lost in performative politics and personalities. Here we are on the cusp of another election cycle, and I think it's time for us to go back to the person who is clearly the patron saint of Inside Sources when it comes to presidents, Calvin Coolidge. And a wonderful piece in the Washington Post by someone who I think could have sat in the presidential chair and given us a lot of confidence as a country. Mitch Daniels is a senior advisor to the Liberty Fund, president emeritus of Purdue University, where he did some extraordinary innovation in higher ed, and, of course, former governor of Indiana. And, Mitch, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Well, boy, good to talk to you.
Love that you have invoked Calvin Coolidge. This is probably the only radio show in America that regularly quotes Calvin Coolidge. But give us some perspective. Why are you turning to Calvin Coolidge in this American moment?
Well, good for you if you noticed him. He's, I think, one of our least appreciated presidents. I think there's a good explanation why. I think he was misrepresented, mistreated by historians, and in the aftermath, they were eager to justify and defend a different view of politics, the New Deal and so forth. But as far as I'm concerned, his virtues and his personal qualities would always make for a good president, maybe especially right now. He was, in his day, as you must know, famously frugal and careful with the taxpayer's dollar. And my goodness, we'd have been well served by that in recent years and again today. And then I also made the point that in his modesty and humility about the job, he, I think, is once again a model I hope we'll at least get closer to. Maybe if we grow out of the style of politics that seems to be in vogue right now.
Yeah, no question about that. And I want to get into some of the specifics of Coolidge in terms of debt and deficits and so on. But before I do that, you're someone who's been in that executive chair as a governor. And it seems that we've gotten so far away from the president being an executive in the executive branch. It's become everything but that. Give us kind of your sense in terms of where we are and how do we get back to having maybe a little more of a governor kind of approach to the White House.
It would help if we had more Coolidge-style humility. I always flinch when somebody talks about the president running the country. I never let anybody, when I was serving, say, you're doing a good job running the state. I would always politely correct them. No, governors and presidents they don't run countries. At most they try to be good stewards of public resources. So Coolidge always understood that, and I too often today I think it's lost sight of. These days, performance in office seems to count for much less than theatrics and almost sometimes juvenile sniping back and forth. And we're not going to take serious adult action against our looming problems, especially our federal debt, while we're trapped in that sort of political, as you said, performance style.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's get into some of that dollars and cents. You're someone who clearly was floated as someone who could be in that executive office in the White House after what you did both at Purdue and in the state of Indiana. You talked about it in this particular column in the Post about the fact that Coolidge was willing to go after the debt, even to make sure he understood how many pencils were being used by those who worked in government.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, sometimes the little things, at least, first of all, they if you take care of enough of them, they do add up. We certainly saw this at Purdue, where we were able to hold tuition constant now for 12 straight years. It wasn't as hard as people imagine it might have been. But there's a certain value also just in the symbolism of being careful with taxpayer dollars. I always told, for instance, school children in our state, that we should never take a dollar from a free citizen without a good reason, because when we do that, we reduce that person's freedom a little bit. If they still had the money, they could spend it on something they chose. When we take it away, and government is essential, but when we do take it away, we better have a very good reason, and we better spend it as carefully and as effectively as we can, or we are not being good stewards. Calvin Coolidge personified that ethic.
Yeah, I think that's true. That one pencil at a time is not a bad way. Imagine if we had kept on that path as a country, we'd be in a very different place today. I want to talk for just a second about your time at Purdue, because not only did you keep the costs in check, you really did create a different kind of space there. I think it's one of the great institutions of higher learning, and I think your tenure there was one of great innovation and really kind of returning higher education to its roots.
Well, we would like to think that. We certainly try to preserve rigor. It's not too many schools these days, as businesses discovered. A high grade point average doesn't necessarily mean anything because everybody's getting them. They're handed out like Halloween candy. At Purdue, we still believe we can show if you earn a high grade there, you really did learn something. That's part of it. We instituted a civics requirement, not real onerous, but I wanted Purdue graduates to become great citizens, not just great employees and leaders of business and other sectors. And so our students do leave, as we call it, the civic certified, among other things. So, we certainly took an emphatic stand about free speech. We didn't tolerate people having their First Amendment rights trespassed or infringed. I think our students and most of our faculty embraced that, and we're proud to help us maintain those standards.
Yeah. Finally, before I let you go, in your piece, you referenced and you referenced this earlier, this idea of Coolidge having this humility again that seems to be so lacking. If you got to ask a question of those appearing on the debate stage on Wednesday in Milwaukee, what's the one thing that you would want to ask that group that would really demonstrate to the American people that they actually have what it takes to be a Coolidge kind of president in the 21st century?
I would ask them what they're going to do to save the safety net before we betray our senior citizens today and tomorrow. This is not debatable. This is not a matter of philosophy. This is an arithmetic fact. We don't have close to the amount of money it's going to take to pay those bills. And it'll be not only an economic catastrophe when that happens, it will be. I think it will be a moment of great social betrayal as people who believe that they've been promised some security in their older years, Social Security and Medicare in particular, are told no, suddenly, sorry about that. We spent the money already. We spent it on ourselves. Both parties have been shamelessly derelict in this area. We have two, at the moment, leading candidates for president who not only aren't planning to do anything about it, they're announced they'd like to make it worse by preventing any reform or even spending more. So I would go after him about that, and I think if President Coolidge were with us today, he would ask a similar question.
Yeah, great insight as always. Mitch Daniels, Senior Advisor to the Liberty Fund, President Emeritus of Purdue University, former Governor of Indiana, and someone I have often looked to as a great policy innovator and someone who understands the principles, including those of Calvin Coolidge, of humility and having that restraint and careful stewardship of the public resources. Sir, thank you so much for making time for us on Inside Sources today.
Thank you, Boyd. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Again, that's Mitch Daniels, former governor of Indiana, someone who I think would have been an excellent chief executive of the United States because he did focus on principle and policy. He wasn't willing to do the theatrics and the performative stuff. And will we get back to that? We may circle back to that later on in the program because I think it's what matters most. We'll be right back.
Back to school, back to back-to-back classes, and back to basics. When you're back to running errands and back in the car, depend on this station to keep you moving with traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the 9s. We've got your back. Mornings and afternoons on KSL News Radio.
Let's cut to the chase. $25 per room for the best no residue carpet cleaning. Everyone loves Zero Res. The service is top-notch, the cleaning is amazing, and here's a price you're going to love too. Schedule today and you'll pay just $25 per room cleaned. Other companies will say they clean as good as Zero Res, but honestly, it's just not the same. Zero Res has patented technology to ensure you get the best cleaning possible. And yes, those patents mean that no one else is cleaning like this. Carpets, air ducts, tile, furniture, and more. Today and tomorrow only, they're cleaning the Wasatch Front for just $25 per room. Minimums and restrictions apply, but there are no maximums. Clean 5 rooms, 6 rooms, clean the whole house, just $25 per room. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. $25 per room for carpets, and call for special pricing on air duct cleanings too. For more info, restrictions, and to schedule, visit ZeroRes.com. Schedule today at ZeroRes.com.
Every 40 seconds, someone dies by suicide. We have the power to change that. Join Promise to Live and promise right now that if you are ever feeling sad, depressed, hopeless, or suicidal, you'll reach out to a friend, family member, 988, or another resource. We need you. Go to promisetolive.org, and once you make the promise, share it. Stop the stigma, start the conversations, and save lives.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Every business deserves a great deal. That's why, for a limited time, we're launching the Mobile Made Free event. With Comcast Business Internet, new and existing customers can find out how to get one line of unlimited mobile free for a year. Yep, you heard that right. An entire year, free. It's our best internet, powered by the next generation 10G network and with 99.9% reliability, paired with the flexibility to bring your own mobile device for no extra cost. Plus, you can save even more on additional lines for anyone in your business who needs one. And a whole year of savings. Well, that adds up. Business-ready mobile service for free, every day of every month for a whole year. Don't wait. The Mobile Made Free event is happening now. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Ends September 21st, 2023. Restrictions apply. Mobile offer requires 100 megabits per second internet package and new unlimited intro mobile service. Other restrictions apply.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Major General Michael Turley has retired after he was accused of an improper relationship with a subordinate. Brigadier General Daniel Boyack has now been appointed as the new head of the Utah National Guard. Second, the Canyon School District welcomed students back today with a whole new set of security cameras watching over the schools. Third, Washington is the latest area of the country affected by wildfires, with at least 2 people killed by fires near Spokane. Right now, 84 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, we continue to watch as recovery efforts continue to move forward to help those devastated on the island of Maui and the communities that have literally lost everything in the recent wildfires. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has announced a sizable donation to the Red Cross to help rebuild and recovery efforts on the island. So what do those recovery efforts look like at this stage? How are the communities coming together to begin to rebuild and show that resilience that we always see in these kinds of moments? And someone who's on the ground watching this all happen, reporting on it, Mary Richards, of course, for the Church News, and had a great piece at Deseret talking about this new donation, $1 million donation to the American Red Cross from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Mary, let's start just with an update. What are you seeing? What are you sensing on the ground there in Maui?
Well, like you said, there is this kind of sense of resiliency and hopes to rebuild and hopes to keep Lahaina with the people really who live there. They want to rebuild there. They still want to live there again, but it's so much work. There's so much to do, and it's a kind of overwhelming driving through and seeing all the devastation. So these efforts like that donation are really, really helping right now, giving financial assistance right to families as they've lost everything. And so there's these different things they need, housing, supplies, clothing, food, medical assistance, help, with all of those kinds of things. Family reunification efforts are also going in with that donation from the Red Cross from the church. All those things they've been working on this weekend. And there is that, of course, that hope and that resiliency. But another message also all weekend that I heard from church leaders was, we are mourning together right now. We are sitting in this pain and this grief together. Yes, of course, we want to hop up and work and move forward, but we can sit and process this grief together.
I'm so glad you raised that, Mary, because I think that's something that we often do miss in these moments. It is the rebuild. It is on to next, and we live in this world that is just so fast forward that we don't really have time to process because we have to get on to the next thing. And I know you participated in a number of meetings and witnessed and reported on a number of meetings over the weekend. Just kind of describe that to us and give us that sense of sitting with that grief for a moment and then how that actually helps when it is time to really move it all forward.
Of course. And the word I used earlier with David Nujanovic on their show was tender. I've said emotional. I've said, all those kinds of words as I've tried to put into words these feelings, but it was a very tender time, very sweet and precious, kind of holy time to be together through music. The Tongan Saints in the Lahaina Second Ward were singing hymns in Tongan as Elder Mark A. Bragg came in to meet them and hug them. And that was really powerful and overwhelming because you could feel that mourning and hope in the song, that request for relief, really, spiritual relief. There's been the hymns yesterday in sacrament meeting. Each one felt so poignant. I don't know, the words really touched a lot of people. There's a power in singing together. There's a power in praying together. So those different meetings as the saints gathered were times to try and find words as they spoke together. Everybody had a story. Everybody had something to share of loss and heartache. And so there's something in trying to communicate that and put it into words as you speak to someone who knows that pain because they felt it too.
Yeah.
And that helps you kind of sit in that. There's also a lot of survivor's guilt and some trauma from those who escaped.
Yeah.
And they think, my home was spared or my life was spared. How do I process that? And so I think it's super healthy to have all of that, so then you can have the strength to then take those next steps.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing that you raised. This coming together is one of the things that we lost in the context of the pandemic, and I always say just crying together with strangers in public, could solve most of the world's problems. I think in the end, but you witness that and the power that comes from that interconnectedness of all of those stories coming together. And I know you've also seen that the governor of Hawaii has been watching those church efforts firsthand. Give us a little sense of what the governor has been seeing and sensing in terms of, hey, maybe there are some lessons to be learned here.
Exactly. He was able to tour this shelter that the Kahului Hawaii Stake members put up in a matter of hours. They put all these partitions together and these beds and tables and chairs and food and showers and linens and bed, clothing, and they got all that together. And he was very impressed and very thankful. He said that the church reached out to him saying, we'd love to meet and talk to you and see what is it you need and how are you doing and the people of on Maui. And he was very appreciative of that outreach. He said our church was the first faith organization he met with, and that was just this weekend, and it had been almost 2 weeks since. So when he toured this shelter, he thanked the volunteers and he was with Bishop W. Christopher Waddell of the presiding bishopric on that tour through the shelter, and thanked the volunteers for that, for all that organization, the quick efforts and the free labor and the donations. Now that shelter was just kind of, I don't want to say dismantled all the way, but the partitions are now down. The government is trying to make sure that they can get people into more permanent / temporary accommodations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
More housing, more stable housing. And so the purpose of the gym on the Stake Center grounds is now changing. They don't have the beds and things anymore now. As of this morning, it's still a donation drop-off center, a place you can come in and ask questions. A lot of people are being sent. So that helps for this in the center in Kahului. People in Lahaina, about 45 minutes away, can go to the Family Assistance Center, meet with volunteers there. So there's a lot of that. Let's step up and help. And many of the volunteers were people who had lost their own livelihoods or whatever. And so the governor was really, really thankful for that.
Yeah, that's always such a powerful thing is you often find that those who are in there working the hardest and the longest are people who've lost the same things or worse. And that's always an astounding thing. Just real quickly, Mary, before I let you go, out about a minute left, give us something that has surprised you or something that has inspired you as you've been there observing and watching this take place.
I've been inspired as a parent about the youth. They can do hard things, and we should not shelter them from those hard things. And I was impressed by and inspired by the youth leaders who did not shelter the kids here in the stake over here from going and serving, because it was a hard thing for them to see. But they came back with such an increased testimony of the love of the Savior and the way that they can help be his hands here on earth.
Fantastic. Mary Richards, reporting, of course, for the Church News. And Mary, we always appreciate your writing and your perspective and really just some extraordinary insight and things that continue to happen there on Maui. And, of course, the donation from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to the Red Cross, over $1 million, plus all of the other help that is happening with the members of the church there in Hawaii. Mary, thanks so much for carving out time. I know it's very busy, very hectic over there. We appreciate you chatting with us and giving us a good insight.
My pleasure.
All right, again, that's Mary Richards joining us from Maui, and again, an important donation from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And also, this is one of those opportunities we all have to do something that makes a difference. We continue to put money together for those in Maui. Bonneville, our parent company here at KSL News Radio, has raised over $350,000, to help in the rebuilding effort, recovery effort there in Hawaii. You can do that at kslnewsradio.com. You can just click on that Maui button, and you can make a difference today as well. And we want to continue to do that because it is something that we can do from right here, right now. And so be part of the solution today. It's a good chance for us to be helpful to those who have suffered such great loss over on the island of Maui. Well, that wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. If you missed it earlier, we had former Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels on talking about some important things in terms of our spending and what we should actually be looking for in a president. You want to check that out on the podcast a little later on today. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Much more to come in hour number 2 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. The Utah National Guard has a new commander. Brigadier General Daniel Boyack has been appointed now by Governor Spencer Cox as the new Adjutant General of the Utah National Guard. This is after Major General Michael Turley decided to retire. He was put on leave last week after an investigation of an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate soldier. He's denied any such relationship took place. Senator Mitt Romney finding himself at a political crossroads right now. Romney's an outspoken critic of former President Trump in a state that's leaned toward Trump. The senator's current term will wrap up next year, and he hasn't decided yet whether he'll run for re-election.
I'll be making that decision sometime this fall. Haven't made a final decision yet, but my decision will be based on whether I think I can get things done for the people of Utah. I don't go to Washington to make noise. I go to Washington to get things done.
Romney won the Republican primary and election in a landslide victory in 2018. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Millions across California and 7 other states on alert as the remains of Tropical Storm Hilary move north. Southern California cleaning up from its first tropical storm in more than 25 years. ABC's Zoreen Shah reports from Palm Desert, California.
It is incredibly muddy. We got about 3 inches of rain, but this area is just not used to even that much rain in one day. The good news is there were no deaths or significant injury from the weather, but there's going to be a lot of cleanup. In LA County, the mayor and other officials talked about how there was incredible amounts of flooding, mudslides, loss of power, 90 traffic accidents.
And what's left of the storm now moving through Nevada and into Idaho, affecting parts of Utah as well. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down as we near the close of trading today, down 36 points. The NASDAQ, though, is up 206 points. And just ahead, we'll be looking at the likelihood of another thunderstorm here coming up. KSL News Time 2:02.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
The Salt Lake Chamber is Utah's voice for business. Okay, that sounds great, but what does it really mean? Well, as Utah's largest and longest-standing business association, they support and champion community prosperity throughout the state. And if you're in business, well, that's a very good thing for you. Be sure to listen to the Chamber's Speaking on Business, weekdays at 7:20, 11:55, and 5:20 p.m. on KSL News Radio.
The name's Osborne, Josh Osborne, and I'm so excited to announce our 00 summer sale here at Volkswagen Southtown.
Summers are for thrills, chills, and hot deals. Get a new high-tech VW for nothing down and no payments for 90 days. Our 00 agents are standing by to make sure you pay nothing down and have no payments for 3 months, so you can achieve your top secret mission this summer.
Come see why we're Utah's #1 Volkswagen dealer. Get to VWSouthtown.com.
2022 VW ranking. Financing through VCI on select models OAC. See dealer for details.
From Audra McDonald to Mozart, from ABBA to Frank Zappa, there's something for you at Utah Symphony and Utah Opera. Feel the grandeur of classical masterworks with a world-class orchestra. Experience adventure and romance with stunning operas and films screened with live music. Hear the best voices in the business sing pop hits. And make memories with the kids at whimsical family concerts. All shows have just gone on sale at the best prices you'll see this year. Get tickets for your favorites at usuo.org. New to the symphony and opera, performances trending now include Black Panther in Concert, Dvorak's wildly popular New World Symphony, an unforgettable collaboration with singer and actress Audra McDonald, and the heartbreaking love story La Boheme. The super low prices for these high-demand shows won't last long, so secure great seats for extraordinary live music experiences now at usuo.org.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meeks.
Fire crews are still on the scene of this roadside fire, affecting the right lane at the top of the on-ramp to northbound I-15 at 21st Street in the Ogden area. If you're traveling through Weber County, the main flow of northbound I-15 traffic is moving, but if you're making that ramp, be prepared to scoot over into that left lane. Did you miss the last sale? I know it's on your list, so don't miss this one. Zero Res carpet cleaning. Right now it's just $25 per room. Minimums apply. Pricing ends Tuesday, August 22nd. Online at zerores.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a chance for thunderstorms again this afternoon for the Wasatch Front. A higher likelihood tomorrow. Storms are possible through the rest of the week. Temperatures will stay in the 80s. Right now we're at 86 degrees and mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
As we speak, President Biden is traveling to Maui, where he will visit and take some observations of the devastating wildfires taking the lives of over 100 people. And the question beyond the headlines of the president is making a visit was he too slow? Is it too little? How do the people on the island see it? What's happening underneath all the headlines of a presidential visit to an area that has been hit with such devastation? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
So as the president wings his way towards Maui to observe and just be given a tour of the devastation, which I'm sure will be very sobering. And I do think it's a good thing that the president's going. Let's be very clear. And this is a tricky thing for presidents of both political parties. It's never easy to know when the right moment is to visit a place where there's been a natural disaster, where there's been a tragedy of some kind. That's always tricky because moving a president around is no easy task. We saw it here in the state of Utah just a few weeks ago, and just seeing how difficult it was for the president to just do a simple trip from the hotel to the VA. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of effort, and when you're dealing with the kind of devastation that Maui is dealing with, the last thing you want to be dealing with is presidential logistics. So that part of it I get. I want to get past that, though, the optics of a presidential visit after some sort of disaster, natural, man-made, or otherwise, and look at the process of how presidents communicate. And I think one of the areas where President Biden and his team have really struggled is meeting the moment. And I often refer back to something that comes out of the Air Force. You've heard me talk about this before in the show. It's called the OODA loop. It's OODA, and it stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And particularly in the early days of air battle, air-to-air combat, the pilot had to be able to use those skills to observe information, the instruments, the speed, the altitude, along with what's going on with the enemy. Then the pilot has to orient themselves to the environment and the circumstances. In other words, with what the pilot has observed, the current environment, what should they do next? Then they have to make a very firm decision, and then they have to act immediately. Hesitation never ends well when you're in air-to-air combat. And the interesting thing from the Air Force perspective is that they found that those pilots who were able to go through that loop of observe, orient, decide, and act, those who could do it most rapidly would always come out victorious because they would continue to cycle at a faster pace. Because once you've done that once, observe, orient, decide, and act, then you do it again based on your action and what took place. And you observe, orient, decide, and you act again. And the faster you can turn over that OODA loop, the more likely you are to achieve victory. I think the president and his team struggle with the OODA loop. And we've seen that manifest in the way they have responded to what has been happening in Hawaii. At first, there was nothing out of the White House at all. No comment, no insight. The president was asked on the way to Air Force One last week in the midst of it all, and the president had no comment. And surely as commander-in-chief, you could at least be sympathizer-in-chief and do something to give a little bit of hope or to offer some encouragement to those that were fighting those fires or those who were dealing with the devastation on the ground, or it took him a couple of days to even say, look, we have marshaled all of the resources of the federal government and they are at the governor's disposal there in Hawaii. So even just the communication loop seems to be very slow for this White House. And I think that's why they often struggle on international affairs, because they are not quick through that loop of observe, orient, decide, and act. And when you're dealing with a very complicated world, you have to be able to do that very swiftly. Otherwise, you end up with bad actors and enemies who are going to take advantage of that. And so whether it's dealing with Ukraine, whether it's dealing and reacting to North Korea, whether it's dealing with Russia or China, the president and his team have to get better at that process of looking at what's coming in, orienting themselves based on the facts and what they know, making a decision, which is often the hardest thing for presidents of both parties, by the way. You get to that Oval Office and making the declarative decision can be difficult. And then sometimes even after the decision has been made, you have so many people in your ear that are causing you to hesitate or vacillate before you act that often you miss the moment. And what we need is that kind of decisive leadership on a host of things, because that gives the American people confidence, it gives our allies around the world confidence, and it sends a very clear signal to our enemies and to those bad actors around the world that we mean business. And this applies to a host of things. Again, it's dealing with natural disasters is one thing. Dealing with a foreign enemy is another. Dealing with global situations. All of those create opportunities for presidents to lead. And I think that's been a challenge for this administration in particular, that they have been very slow in the uptake of new information coming in. So as things on the ground change in a particular setting, they're a little bit slow to take up the new information, reorient, make new decisions, and then act again with that precision and decisiveness. And so those are all things that are challenging for any president, but they are particularly for this administration, and I think it has often put them on sort of their back foot, so to speak, where they're sort of in a defensive crouch often, rather than having the confidence to lean in, be on their front foot, and take advantage of opportunities to really make a difference, whether it's to help the American people in a situation like a fire in Maui, or whether it's being on our front foot dealing with our adversaries like Russia and China. But you have to have a vision of that, you have to have a strategy for that, and you have to have the ability to process new information and then make adjustments. Because it's always about the adjustments. All the best game plans in the world go out the window after things begin. And that is the test. It's a test of a great coach in athletics. You can have a great game plan going into a football game or a basketball game or a soccer match. and that'll go out the window very quickly once the ball gets rolling, or once somebody smashes you in the mouth or makes a big play. And so then you have to adjust, and then you have to decide, then you have to act, and then you have to reorient with new information by what you observe, and you start that process all over again. And so it doesn't matter what it is. And guess what, folks? The same thing applies in family interactions, in community problem solving, in dealing with schools and teachers and administrators and parents, to government and everything in between. The process is always the same. And so it's a smart thing for all of us to figure out, how well do we do that? Because I guarantee you, in your personal life, in your profession, your ability to follow that OODA loop of observe, orient, decide, act, do it again. Observe, orient, decide, act. The faster you can do that, and the better you get at executing that, the more likely you are to find success. I think it's something that the Biden administration could use a crash course in, because I think it would help them to respond to natural disasters like Hawaii, and helping our allies around the world while dealing with some of our enemies. It's the OODA loop. It just takes a time to figure out that process and become proficient.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. BYU's Big 12 season can't start soon enough.
He's going to go 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown!
This Monday, join us for the premiere of Cougar Nation. Cougar Nation. BYU insider Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte look ahead to opening day. They analyze the new, bigger Big 12. And they take your calls, BYU fans. That's this Monday night, 6 to 7. Cougar Nation. Cougar Nation on KSL News Radio.
Hercules Credit Union has been around since 1946. They're here to help you grow stronger together. They have great locations in Taylorsville and Harriman, Riverton, Salt Lake City, and, of course, always you can find them at HerculesCU.com. And right now you want to check them out because you have an opportunity to go for the gold. You can open a checking account with Hercules Credit Union, qualify for their gold tier status, which is what you're going to want to do. You do that in the first 90 days, and Hercules will deposit $200 into your account. That's a good day. Not to mention, you'll get all the benefits of being a gold tier checking account member. You'll have the ultimate in ID, identity theft protection. You'll have travel benefits, cellular care coverage, and a host of other benefits, plus that extra $200 in your account when you qualify for gold tier status in your first 90 days. So it's time to go for the gold. As I said, check them out anywhere, Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, or Salt Lake City, and always HerculesCU.com, HerculesCU.com.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Wake up, people. You are optimizing every waking hour of your life. From carpooling kids to work to friends and everything in between. You have to get sleep and a bed that can perform as well as you do. Meet the next generation Sleep Number Smart Bed. It effortlessly adjusts to your shape, position, and movements, learning how you sleep so you learn to sleep better night after night. Sleep next level, only from Sleep Number.
It's the biggest sale of the year. Save 50% on the Sleep Number limited edition smart bed, plus free home delivery when you add a base. Ends Monday.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep, switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Jeff Kaplan's Minute of News.
We're committed to letting you know exactly what's going on. On our show, we're going to bring you up to speed on what's happening in the world to this moment. At the same time, the news can be really burdensome. It can leave you feeling a little bit depressed and even a little bit more depressed. My Minute of News is just a moment to lift you up. I'm blessed that KSL has given me the freedom to talk about whatever I want. Literally, it is my minute of news. Sometimes it's pegged to what's happening that very day. Sometimes it might be something bizarre that you didn't know happening somewhere else in the world. To make you smile for a moment, even on a difficult day, and make you realize the world is still spinning. I am so honored that so many people have appreciated and enjoy the Minute of News every afternoon.
Ride Home with Jeff Kaplan, weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Palmas. First, Utah's National Guard has a new adjutant general. After Major General Michael Turley retired, he had been accused of an improper relationship with a subordinate, which he's denied. Second, Senator Mitt Romney says he still hasn't made up his mind about running for re-election. Third, what's left of Tropical Storm Hillary, bringing rain to Nevada and Idaho, as well as parts of Utah. Right now, 86 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, as we march our way towards the first Republican primary debate on Wednesday from Milwaukee, it's always important to actually step back a little bit before you dive in, get some perspective, and as we always like to do, look at the numbers behind the headlines and get to the information that is not just in the soundbite. And when we do that, we always like to look to Olivier Knox, of course, national political correspondent and anchor of the Daily 202 at the Washington Post. And Olivier, thanks for jumping on with us today.
Sure, always a pleasure.
You're looking at four particular numbers that have a lot to say in terms of the current state of politics and kind of the under the headline category there. And the first one you talked about in the 202 today was talking about what do the voters really mean when they're talking about the economy? Explain that for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've seen the polling for the last few decades, and you know that the economy is always front and center in any presidential election. But it's a little maddening if you're trying to get a more precise sense of what voters think and what voters feel about the economy. We've seen divergent numbers between how people say they themselves are doing and how the country is doing. People tend to rate their personal economy higher. But recently, last month, the poll went up from The Economist /YouGov, and I thought it was really helpful. Basically, they asked their respondents, what's the best measure for how the national economy is doing? 6% said the stock market. That's not that much of a surprise. Just 15% said jobs, which was a bit more of a surprise to me. But 57% said the price of goods and services is the best measure for how the national economy is doing. Now, that's not great news for President Biden because, of course, of inflation over the past couple of years. It also helps to explain why even well-to-do Americans rate the economy poorly because, whether you're making $30,000 or $100,000, no one really likes to be paying more today for something that they paid less for yesterday. So I thought that was a pretty important number to look at.
Yeah, I think that is so interesting. You can look at all the things where I think President Biden has been frustrated wanting to tout, look, we've done this, and we've done this, and we've done this, and people are like, yeah, but it costs more for my cable TV subscription, and that's created some of that angst.
Yeah, and that speaks to the challenge he's going to have campaigning on the economy. His campaign just put out this big video. It's going to run digitally and run on TV, and it's all about his economic record. It talks about manufacturing being up, unemployment being at record lows, and things like that. But this number, this 57%, shows that he's got sort of an uphill climb.
Yeah, definitely a challenge there. I want to get into one area that kind of connects to that, and that is this idea of what it means for the rest of that Republican primary field. That the president appears to be a little weak at the moment. You had some really interesting insight in that. Share that with us.
Yeah, Shane Goldmacher at the New York Times had a really interesting piece over this weekend, basically saying that Republican voters have been bombarded with images and messages that Biden is frail, is weak, is stumbling, is fumbling, is failing. And one thing that it's done is that it has convinced Republican voters that really anyone could beat Joe Biden. Well, that's not great news for the Republican candidates like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who had hoped to make an electability argument, who had hoped to tell voters, look, you got to leave Trump in the past. He lost in 2020. He's a distraction now. Why not go with a better, stronger, younger candidate, however you want to put it. But if it's true that anyone can beat Joe Biden, then why change horses in midstream? Why not just stick with Donald Trump? So that was an interesting. I thought Shane's piece was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it does help to explain why folks like DeSantis are having a tougher time than they might otherwise.
Yeah, that electability component has sort of gotten pushed to the sideline, and so that has changed that dynamic. It'll be really fascinating to see how they navigate that on the debate stage. We've been saying today it's the what do you do when the elephant in the room is not in the room? And I think that's going to be the interesting thing on Wednesday night is I don't know if Chris Christie will have anything to swing at and who will mention the president and who won't. But that electability becomes such an interesting argument. I want to get to one of the thing you concluded with in the 202 today because I really thought this was intriguing in terms of that. There's always that debate of does government have too much power, not enough power, and break down the numbers for us.
Sure. So Gallup has asked this question for years and years and years. In 2003, 47% of Democrats and 35% of Republicans agreed that the federal government has too much power. Now, you'll notice that both those numbers are under 50%. Historically, Americans are pretty mistrustful of the federal government, but the 9/11 attacks changed that for a few years. But what I thought was striking is that the Republican number has really escalated under President Obama, notably, and then, of course, after COVID, we are now at 73% of Republicans who say the federal government has too much power against 31% of Democrats. And the evolution here is the GOP number in 2007 is 48%. It's 54% in 2008. And then it rockets up to 78% in 2009. Wow. You look at Democrats, even in the Trump era, Democrats were only above 50% once. They were 51 in 2019. And what I said in the newsletter and what I'll share with you now is that this really suggests a crisis in American politics. We always expect Republicans to find Democratic rule undesirable. We expect Democrats to consider GOP rule undesirable, but this suggests something different, which is that the GOP might see Democratic rule not just as undesirable, but actually illegitimate.
Yeah, I think that is a whole new argument, and I do think that is the crisis point that we're heading towards in our politics. And so before I let you go, Olivier, give us kind of your sense. So what are you watching for in this first debate coming up in Milwaukee? Anything kind of under the radar that's on your radar that you're going to be saying, let's see how they navigate this?
Obviously, I'm really excited to see what 2% asks 6% about tax policy.
Yeah.
And that's a reference to their job, a reference to their poll numbers. Honestly, I mean, this is a big moment for all of these candidates. They'll be introducing themselves or reintroducing themselves to the voters. There is still a fairly sizable movable voter population among the Republicans, people who could be convinced to change their minds, people who are currently on the fence. So I think it's really important. Because I'm a foreign policy dork by training, I'm very interested to see how the other candidates respond to Vivek Ramaswamy's various curious pronouncements over the past week to 10 days, saying that he would let China have Taiwan after 2028, assuming that he would have moved microchip manufacturing out of the island, saying that Israel should be treated like just any other Middle Eastern country, and apparently of late flirting with 9/11 trutherism. So there's a lot there. He seemed to be getting some traction recently in places like important places like New Hampshire. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, and as we say, restraint always works. And usually it's when a candidate feels like they have some momentum, and then suddenly they're out over their skis, and it all comes crashing down in a big hurry. But we'll watch all of that as it plays out on Wednesday. Olivia Knox, national political correspondent and anchor of the Daily 202 at the Washington Post, that we always turn to for great insight and perspective. Olivier, thanks for joining us today, as always.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right. Again, that's Olivier Knox from the Washington Post, the Daily 202, and you should just make that part of your day. It does provide such great perspective. There's always intriguing numbers. There's always intriguing insight, some things that are going to cause you to step back and say, I hadn't thought of it that way, or, boy, that's a different perspective. And that's what we try to do on this show, and that's why we love to have Olivier on the program, is because he always helps us think differently and stay curious about what we think we know and about what we think we could do a little bit different. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. Much more Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio. Stick around.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. Our top story this hour, we have breaking news. A judge in Georgia has set bail for former President Donald Trump at $200,000. ABC News reports the bond agreement also requires Trump to avoid any act meant to intimidate co-defendants or witnesses in the case. That would include his posts on social media. The former president expected to surrender to authorities in Atlanta later this week. The former president and 18 others are accused of trying to subvert the presidential election in Georgia. He says his actions were not illegal and the charges are politically motivated. Fire crews working on the Thompson fire in Beaver County are already planting seeds, hoping to restore areas burned by the fire. They're also worried the heavy rainfall expected in southern Utah could result in some flash flooding. That fire has burned about 7,200 acres. It's now 85% contained. Federal crews are turning responsibility for that effort back to local firefighters tomorrow. Our top national story again this hour from ABC News. As the fighting grinds on in Ukraine, a new set of approved F-16 fighters could soon be available for Ukrainian pilots, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. ABC's Tom Sufi Burridge is in Ukraine with more.
Denmark and the Netherlands saying they'll supply up to 61 of those American-made warplanes to Ukraine. The Ukrainian leader calling the announcement historic. Zelensky thanking the U.S. President Biden's approval was key. Denmark saying the first of its jets will arrive here by the end of this year.
Ukrainian pilots, though, would still need months of training before they're ready to fly those F-16s. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing the trading day down 37 points today, and the NASDAQ was up strongly, up 206 points right now. And just ahead, we could see some more thunderstorms this afternoon. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
This summer, the political season heats up.
By August, it'll be time for debates. Can you believe it?
We're planning coverage of the real issues, the important stories that impact how we live.
Listen each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio. Here is what I'm not buying. A bounce house, a paddleboard, a dump trailer, tables and chairs for a party, a 3D printer. I'm not buying them because I'm renting them on Utilize. Utilize is the app where you can rent almost anything, and you can rent out almost anything. Scroll through the Utilize app and you'll see kayaks, VR headsets, baby carrier backpacks, balloon arches, power tools, I mean almost anything. And renting is so easy, so local, and so much cheaper than buying stuff that sits in your garage. You need it, you rent it. And if you have stuff you don't use every day, rent it out on Utilize. I talked to one woman in Lehigh who rents out 80 different items that just sit around her house. It's an income stream. Imagine the possibilities. You can rent a sound system for a party, rent an e-bike for an adventure, need a tool for your DIY project, Utilize. Now, it's spelled different. Yoodlize. Utilize. Download the app and get a $20 credit when you use the code KSL. Utilize. Yoodlize. It's in your app store.
The extracurricular activities, the traffic, the nightly homework, the traffic. The finding time to eat dinner together as a family. The traffic. Back to school can be stressful. Thanks to Ziploc, meal prep doesn't have to be. New Ziploc bags with Stay Open design have a patented stand-up bottom that helps keep the bag upright and a top crease that folds and holds for easy filling, unlocking a second set of hands in the kitchen. If only it unlocked a second set of lanes. New Ziploc brand freezer and storage bags with Stay Open design from S.C. Johnson, a family company.
Dave and Dujanovic.
I want listeners to feel like they want to share this conversation at the dinner table.
I want listeners to feel informed, more informed than when they joined this show, and they're more in the know than they've ever been before.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We're back to a good drive on all the Valley freeways, and fire crews have left the scene of that roadside fire in Ogden. But we still have the final cleanup of the crash eastbound Timpanogos Highway at 5th West. Remember, it's the eastbound lanes closed on the commuter lane. Give your savings a boost with 5% APY on a 12-month certificate from Cyprus Credit Union. Learn more at cypruscu.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a chance for thunderstorms again this afternoon for the Wasatch Front. Tomorrow, that likelihood is even higher. The storms are possible through the rest of the week. Temperatures will stay in the 80s. It's 86 degrees and mostly cloudy right now at KSL News Radio. 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
We are thrilled to actually have live in studio today Megan McArdle, one of our favorite thinkers and writers from the Washington Post. And Megan, welcome to the Beehive State.
Thank you. I am just as thrilled to be here. More thrilled, really.
Well, we love following what you're watching, and you're one of those people who have this great ability to be quick to observe and to understand the nuance of what's going on in the nation. And that's a rare gift, and then your ability to articulate that in words and just powerful phrases is something we always look to. It's one of our crucial inside sources and resources here on the show. And I want to get to something I know you have been not just thinking about, you've been noodling heavy on this for a bit. And that's this whole idea of abundance and how it plays out, particularly in our politics and trying to get things done.
Yeah, I think there's always been this fight between the right and the left over were we going to try to have more to be more prosperous, or were we going to try to redistribute what we had? And I think now what you're actually seeing is that some people on the left are kind of coming to the realization that if they want, there's a bunch of stuff they want to do, right? They want green energy, they want more housing, they want all of these things, they want more opportunity for people who are starved of it, and that requires building things. And that if you look at a state like California, what New York Times columnist Ezra Klein calls everything bagel liberalism, where you have to do every single thing and every single project, is actually making it impossible to build anything. And so unfortunately, I think at the same time you have seen the rise of MAGA conservatives who they talk about things like deregulation, but what they actually focus their energies on, if you're looking at the Republican primary right now, it's culture war stuff. It's not making there more so that we are healthier and have more prosperous lives and more opportunity for ourselves and our children. It's about, who has status, who is respected, and I'm going to make sure it's me. I don't want to totally discount that. I understand that. I actually am sympathetic with some of their grievances, but I think it is unfortunate that it's kind of taking the eyes off the ball of the baseline problem of how do we generate enough and more prosperity and more abundance for everyone.
Yeah, and let's unpack that a little bit. So let's look at it from the left. You talk about something within the Green New Deal or Green Energy Plan or something. Give us an example of how that too big prevents anything from actually getting done.
I mean, I think you see things like prevailing wage laws. You see things like the deal that Joe Biden, the Biden administration did to bring semiconductors to Arizona, and suddenly it's got a child care. It's got you have to have daycare subsidies as part of this. Well, it's not that daycare is not a good thing for people. It's very necessary for people to have somewhere that they can care for their kids as they go out to earn money for their families. But that said, putting that on, if you're raising the cost of the product and we're already trying to compete with Taiwan and with our semiconductor, maybe you could have put that to the side. But no, every single requirement has to be piled onto each project to the point where the projects then don't really work as projects to do the important priority, like building semiconductor capacity, the core of our modern economy in the United States, especially as a hedge against the event that China invades Taiwan. We need that capacity, and you can't do every good thing in every project.
Yeah, that desire to do everything often prevents you from doing anything.
Exactly.
And we've seen that, and you and I were talking about this for something that will air on Sunday, on the Sunday edition on KSL TV, talking about in the context of something like immigration.
Yeah.
Like if you try to do every single component of it, you end up with nothing, and then it usually ends up back into culture war point.
Exactly. And I think, most Americans are sympathetic to immigrants. They understand people are coming here to build a better life for their family. What's more American than that? All of our ancestors did it, unless we're Native American. And so, but they don't like lawless immigration. They don't like the chaos at the border. They want the border secured. They also want to make it possible for people who do come here. I think, the process is Byzantine and insane. They want a more rational process. They also probably want to have conversations about what kinds of immigrants and how many. But I think those two baseline things is that there should be a rational process and that the border needs to be secure. We could do those separately. Instead, we try to tie it into a big package that has been languishing in Congress for like 2 decades at this point.
Yeah, and it seems like when we try to do everything, we end up, we often just refer to it as the fake fight and the false choice. Yeah. And to me, it's getting to the focus. Focus always precedes success, especially when you're doing legislation. But it's looking at those principles that rule of law and compassion are actually compatible principles.
Yes, you wouldn't necessarily think so to hear the debate today, but that's absolutely true. And one of the things that I'm often arguing to both sides, depending on the controversy, is that rule of law is compassion. There's always the temptation at the moment, but I don't like this outcome, so I'm just going to take the rules. Well, that rule is protecting the people that you want to protect. Yeah. At the end of the day, if you don't have a process that everyone can agree is fair, you don't have anything. You just have people banging each other over the head to get what they want. And, we've already moved a little too far in that direction. Let's step back a bit.
Yeah, there is another way to approach this, to be sure. So how do we change that conversation from and obviously when people are running for office, it is the kitchen sink plus mentality that you have to throw in there. How do we change that dynamic? Because often I think that creates expectations that just aren't real, which then undercuts trust and builds cynicism, and it seems to be kind of a vicious cycle we're in.
No, I think that's really true. The tendency for American politics is to overpromise and underdeliver, and it would be much better if it were the other way around, not just, I think, for Americans, but for the politicians in the long term. Because if you look at the level of trust in Congress, even moving down to state houses, there's more, thankfully, but not enough as much as there should be. Part of that is because people just assume that when a politician's lips moving, they're lying. Yeah. And it's the politicians are not just venal liars who care about nothing but getting elected. They really want to believe their own hype. The best salespeople always do. But, someone should reel this back towards a more realistic expectation for government, because we're, I think, again, simultaneously over-expecting.
Yeah.
We expect way more than government can possibly deliver. And then, when we don't get it, we say, oh, well, they're idiots. They can't do anything. And neither of those things are true.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're just joining us, we have Washington Post columnist Megan McArdle actually in the Beehive State in the studio today. We're thrilled to have that. We're going to stay with the conversation just a little bit longer, so stick around. We'll be right back more on Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Let's cut to the chase. $25 per room for the best no residue carpet cleaning. Everyone loves Zerorez. The service is top-notch, the cleaning is amazing, and here's a price you're going to love too. Schedule today and you'll pay just $25 per room cleaned. Other companies will say they clean as good as Zerorez, but honestly, it's just not the same. Zerorez has patented technology to ensure you get the best cleaning possible. And yes, those patents mean that no one else is cleaning like this. Carpets, air ducts, tile, furniture, and more. Today and tomorrow only, they're cleaning the Wasatch Front for just $25 per room. Minimums and restrictions apply, but there are no maximums. Clean 5 rooms, 6 rooms, clean the whole house, just $25 per room. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. $25 per room for carpets, and call for special pricing on air duct cleanings too. For more info, restrictions, and to schedule, visit Zerorez.com. Schedule today at Zerorez.com.
As we wonder why our kids are struggling,
Someone is getting bullied. As we discuss how to improve their mental health, someone is being harassed on social media. As we wonder why they're skipping school, someone is crying themselves to sleep. Knowing the signs is the best way to prevent bullying.
Please just leave me alone.
Learn the signs at sandyhookpromise.org.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along, which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to this exclusive web address, ziprecruiter.com/free. That's ziprecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. It drove me crazy. It got so bad, I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't concentrate. I absolutely refused to let any of my friends come to our house for any reason. I would have been humiliated if anyone found out how much my dad drank and how loud my mom screamed at him. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful. The only thing that happened is my mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. Her relationship with my dad really changed. I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I wanted to see if I could have a better relationship with my dad. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
2 friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
2 teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it, I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Question: what will you find on all over-the-counter or OTC medicine packages to help you choose the right drug and use it safely? The answer: the Drug Facts label. This label lists the medicine's active ingredients and purpose, how much to take, and warnings you should know before using it. Remember, even OTC medicines you buy without a prescription can cause side effects you don't want. So follow the information listed on the Drug Facts label. For more information, visit fda.gov/drugfactslabel. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Jeff Kaplan.
I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news.
Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News, 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomis. First, a judge in Atlanta has set bail for former President Trump at $200,000. He and 18 other defendants are accused of conspiracy meant to change the results of the 2020 presidential election. Second, firefighters are getting ahead of a large wildfire burning in southern Utah and planting seeds to take advantage of the wet weather. And third, it looks like Ukraine will get the F-16 fighter jets it wants, but it'll be a while before it can use them. Right now, 86 degrees and mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
We're going to stay with the conversation just a little bit longer. Of course, as Einstein said, it's not that he was any smarter than anyone. He was just willing to stay with the question a little bit longer. And one of our favorite people who always stays with the question a little longer is Megan McArdle, columnist for the Washington Post. And Megan, I want to get to a couple of things. You've been here in the Beehive State for a week now. Share with us something that has jumped out at you during your stay in Utah this time around.
I think it is, for me, it's the fact that everyone here is really invested in their institutions, and this is such a nice thing to see, is that there is a sense that, it's not that Utah doesn't do politics. I'm not some naive person who's like, oh, well, everything's perfect here. I don't think that. But I do think that when I watch Utahns, I've never said that word. Is that the correct way to say it?
You did it right. Okay. You got it right. You're official now. You're in.
Okay. Buying a beehive on my way home. When I watch Utahns deal with each other, they, when you talk to left, when you talk to right, there is a common sense that like our institutions belong to all of us and we all have a real investment in making them work. I think, you see there's a real difference in how Utah approaches social services, where there is this real emphasis on reliance, working alongside other things. There's this willingness to experiment. And I came here yesterday. I was visiting something we talked about on the Sunday show. I was visiting the Other Side Village, which is a new project to provide permanent tiny houses for the chronically homeless. And, this is a program that Utah was a pioneer in something called Housing First, which was the idea that we just get homeless into homes and then we try to deal with the other stuff, because if they're not housed, we can't really address any of the rest of it. And this is looking at that, and people there are still saying, no, Housing First is good, but what's the next step? Yeah. How do we move people beyond that? Because so many people get stuck right in that, I have a home, I'm kind of stable, but I'm still vulnerable because if I lose my supportive housing, if I get a job, I lose my supportive housing, then I lose my job, I'm right back into the cycle. How do you get people to a more permanent, stable place where they can think about, am I doing entrepreneurship? Am I doing volunteer service? What am I doing? How am I participating in a real community? That's the kind of stuff that you see here, and I wish I saw it in more other places.
Yeah. You wrote a piece not too long ago in the Washington Post talking about democracy in America and where we are, and we always share that we can be pretty pessimistic about some of the politicians and a lot of the politics today, but the fact that we're still really bullish on the future of the country. I always say it's because of the neighborhood I live in is why I have great confidence in the future of the country. Give us your perspective as you look out across the country.
I look at the way Americans deal with each other in real life when they are, not screaming at each other online, not at a political rally. One of my favorite stories, I was at a Trump rally and they were literally chanting, lock them up, about the media. And at the same time, I was stranded outside the media pen, which Trump likes to put in the center of his rallies so you can yell at them more efficiently. And I'm trying to make my way through this crowd. And the crowd is like going, lock them up. And then they're like, honey, she's got to get back to the press. Move it. She's got to get out of the way. And they were all really nice to me. Like, I'm wearing my press badge and I got dehydrated because it's Arizona. It's 98 degrees. I don't know what I'm doing because I'm from the East. And people are giving me water, and that is, I think, actually a metaphor for everything, right? Is that we scream at each other in theory, but in practice, we love each other. We treat each other decently. We're the number of people who don't treat other Americans decently is really, really small. And I don't care where you go. I don't care. It's the worst neighborhood, the highest crime neighborhood. Most of the people in that neighborhood are being good neighbors and good people to each other. And we just have to hold on to that. There's a line that I think is from Chesterton, but I've never been able to find it. But he said that, people, critics of 19th century literature looked at it and said there are no sewers, and this is not realistic. It's sort of a fantasy. And the mistake that those people made was to conclude that if having no sewers was unrealistic, that realism was sewers. And in fact, yes, that's one part of it, but it's actually a really small part of what goes on. And most of what goes on is above and better than that. And that's the part that unfortunately, I think we've gotten into the mindset of focusing on the sewers rather than everything we have built above them.
Yeah. You actually had in your piece in the Washington Post an example from back in the 1930s. Yeah. Someone who had traveled the country at a time when Chinese, Asian Americans were very looked down on. Just share that perspective.
This is one of my favorite stories. This is a sociologist, and he goes basically on the road with one of his grad students who is Chinese and his Chinese wife. And they are going everywhere, and they don't write ahead because they're afraid to hear no. So they just show up, and they're like, will you serve us? Well, out of the hundreds of restaurants and hotels that they attempted, one restaurant refused to serve them. Every other place took them in. And so he then goes back, and he writes letters to all of these places and says, will you serve Chinese people? And almost all of them said no. And the reason, look, that's a terrible story on one level, right? It is that these people were willing to profess terrible bigotry against Chinese Americans. But on the other level, it makes me happy because we are accustomed to the idea that people are hypocrites about race in a bad direction, right? That they profess that they care about racial equality and then they choose segregated neighborhoods and schools. But it goes the other way. We are often say things that are worse than we will really behave in person. And I think we have to hold on to that. And I also think I'm a little encouraged by, I think people are getting tired of the rage. Yeah. I just sense, what was the point of spending the last 10 years screaming at each other? And people just saying, I'm just going to go find something to do. I'm going to go find some people to talk to about something that's positive and not negative. And so I think actually, one hope I have for America among the many great things about this country is that I think we're inching ourselves back towards a healthier way of thinking about each other, about our own lives, and about our future.
Yeah. Well, as always, I want to know what's on your mind, what's on your radar as you look out across what you're reading, what you're thinking about. What are some of the things on the horizon that are probably under the radar for most people, but things that I know you're getting ready for?
I'm thinking about a lot of over-the-radar stuff, like what is happening with AI, what is going to happen with biomedical innovation, what is going to happen with the 2024 election. I think that one of the things that is the biggest kind of undiscussed crisis is the learning loss. And I know Utah did not have this problem as much as a lot of the blue states that kept schools closed longer. But I think the learning loss has been catastrophic. It's been a real crisis. And I don't feel like we are anywhere close to, this is a national emergency, and we should be treating it like a national emergency. And we just aren't. No one's really talking about, do we just cancel summer vacation for a year? Do we have a year where school is 2 hours longer? Do we do something intensive to get kids back to where they need to be?